Now we talk about another place where this wrong view comes about, that there can be arahant liberated by wisdom who does not have any jhana. This concerns the liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom. Now this, in the Majjhima Nikaya, there's a sutta, Kittagiri Sutta, which talks about I think the 7 types of individuals. Then it mentions the 2 types of arahants. The 2 types of arahant mentioned there is called the Ubato Bhaga Vimutti, the 2 ways liberated arahant, and the arahant who is liberated by mind. So you see in that sutta, it talks about these 2 types of arahants without mentioning the word liberation by wisdom. But on the other hand, there are other suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya that talks about the 2 types of arahant, liberated by wisdom and liberated by mind. So there are some writers who say that when the Buddha mentions liberation by wisdom and liberation by mind, he is referring to one arahant. Maybe in some suttas the Buddha might mean that lah. But there is actually one sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 64, where it is very clear that liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom refers to 2 types of arahants. In that sutta, the Buddha talked about how a person gets rid of the 5 lower fetters by the jhanas, the first jhana, second jhana, etc. So Ananda was thinking, here the Buddha is talking about getting rid of the fetters by the jhanas. But he was thinking, there is an arahant liberated by wisdom, there is an arahant liberated by mind. So he asked the Buddha, why is it there are some monks liberated by wisdom and some monks liberated by mind? Then the Buddha said, it's because there is a difference in the faculties of beings. In other words, because people are different, some people are naturally liberated by mind, some arahants are naturally liberated by wisdom. Now in that sutta, the Pali word is ekache bhikkhu ceto vimuttino, ekache bhikkhu panya vimuttino, meaning there are some bhikkhus who are liberated by mind and there are some bhikkhus liberated by wisdom. So from here you can see liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom refers to 2 types of arahant. So how are we going to reconcile that there is 2 types of arahant here mentioned, liberated by wisdom and liberated by mind, whereas in the Majjhima Nikaya 70 it says liberated by wisdom and 2 ways liberated. If you read further, there is actually one sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya that says that liberation by mind actually refers to the 2 ways liberated one. This is in the Digha Nikaya. In the Digha Nikaya, the Buddha said that there is a person who is liberated by mind and liberated by wisdom. Therefore, he is called the both ways liberated one. So you can see when the Buddha says 2 ways liberated, he means a person who is liberated by mind as well as liberated by wisdom. Because when a person is liberated by mind, he can't do without wisdom. Yes or not? Because wisdom only can bring you out of samsara. So, on the other hand, when you say a person liberated by mind, you don't mean that he's liberated by wisdom. You may only mean that he's liberated, if a person is liberated by wisdom, that means he's not liberated by mind, he's only liberated by wisdom. Now, here is where some mistake is made, because in the Majjhima Nikaya, it is stated that the two ways liberated Arahant is a person who attains the 8 deliverances. And the 8 deliverances refers to 8 things. One is a person can see the inside of his body. During meditation, he can see the internal parts of his body. And the second deliverance is he can see outside, even with his eyes closed, he can see outside. The third one is called the contemplation of the beautiful, probably something to do with metta. Then the fourth one onwards refers to the arupa jhanas. Okay? So, the two ways liberated Arahant, or the Arahant liberated by mind, is supposed to attain up to all the arupa jhanas, all the arupa jhanas, and the rupa jhanas Whereas it is also stated, the Arahant who is liberated by wisdom, he does not attain the 8 liberations, does not experience the 8 liberations. So, these people, because it is stated that the Arahant liberated by wisdom does not attain the 8 deliverances, they assume that he does not have the arupa jhanas, because the 8 deliverances refer to the arupa jhanas. So they assume that Arahant liberated by wisdom does not have the 8 arupa jhanas. This is a mistake, I will show you later why it's a mistake. And so they say, this Arahant liberated by wisdom can only have the maximum of the 4 rupa jhanas. And so that's why the commentaries say there is 5 types of this type of Arahant. One is he has attained all the 4 jhanas. One is he has attained 3, 2, 1 and 0 jhana. And this is a big mistake. Why? Because even in the commentaries, it is stated, under this Majjhima Nikaya commentaries, it is stated that if wisdom is to the forefront, such a monk is called liberated by wisdom. If his one-pointedness of mind is to the forefront, he is called liberated by mind. And then they continue. Sariputta was liberated by wisdom, and Moggallana was liberated by mind. So here, this commentary is saying, if when I read this, it refers to the moment of liberation. At the moment when that Arahant is liberated, if wisdom is more, he is called liberated by wisdom. If he is using strength of mind more, then he is called liberated by mind. And this opinion has got substance in the Nikayas. Why? Because if we examine all the 4 Nikayas, you will find that an Arahant is liberated in the Nikayas 3 ways. 3 ways. One is an Arahant who attains all the arupa jhanas. And after attaining all the arupa jhanas up to cessation of perception and feeling, when his consciousness stops, and then after that, when he comes out of cessation, he contemplates. And by his wisdom, he becomes liberated. That is one type of Arahant. Now the second type of Arahant, which is mentioned in the 4 Nikayas, is like the Buddha. He uses the 4 jhanas. He attains 4 jhanas, and then after that, he contemplated the past lives. First he contemplated the past lives. Many of his past lives. After that, he contemplated the arising and passing away of beings. How beings arise and pass away according to karma. Then after that, he contemplated the 4 Aryan truths, the 4 noble truths. From there, he attained destruction of the asavas. That is the second type of arahant who uses the 4 jhanas. Now these 2 types of arahant are mentioned in the Nikayas as liberated by mind and liberated by wisdom. That means these 2 types of arahants is the 2 ways liberated arahant, or the arahant liberated by mind. On the other hand, there is a 3rd type of arahant, and this is in the case of Sariputta. In one of the Majjhima Nikaya suttas, Sariputta was said to be fanning the Buddha. One day the Buddha was talking to an ascetic, and that called Diganaka. And at that time, Sariputta had just started to follow the Buddha. Let me see. It was only about 14 days. 14 days after he first came to the Buddha. So being new, he had a lot of respect for the Buddha. He was acting like somebody attending to the Buddha. He was fanning the Buddha, He was not meditating, he was just fanning the Buddha. And he was listening to the Buddha talking to Diganaka, the ascetic. And then from listening to the Buddha speaking to Diganaka, suddenly he got enlightened, became an arahant. Now according to the commentary, this type of arahant is called liberated by wisdom. Meaning he did not use his jhana at all. He only used his wisdom. At that point, at that time when he became liberated, he was not using any jhana. In other words, he was not meditating. This happens in the case of some arahants who are not meditating. For example, in the Dhammapada commentary, there was a case of an arahant. He was walking a long distance. Then he came to a waterfall. He wanted to clean himself. He was cleaning himself at the waterfall. He saw the water rushing down continuously. Then when he contemplated, this looked like samsara. Samsara beings are rushing about in samsara, never ending. Suddenly, with that thought, he became liberated. This type of person is actually liberated by wisdom. He did not use jhana at the time. He was liberated. But that does not necessarily mean that he does not have jhana, or he does not have arupa jhana. In the case of Sariputta, it is mentioned in Majjhima Nikaya, one of the suttas, when the Buddha praised Sariputta, he said Sariputta has got all the 4 jhanas and all the 8 jhanas plus the cessation of perception of feeling. In other words, all the 9 jhanas Sariputta has got. But in spite of the fact that Sariputta has got all the 9 jhanas, he does not have any psychic power. This psychic power depends on people. There are some people who can attain psychic power, some people who cannot attain. So in the case of Sariputta, he has all the jhanas, yet is called liberated by wisdom. This is where the discrepancy comes in. The commentaries is trying to say that a person liberated by wisdom does not have any arupa jhana, because they use the Kitagiri Sutta, which says that the arahant liberated by wisdom has not attained the 8 deliverances. But actually what is actually meant is at the moment of liberation, at the moment of liberation, he did not attain the 8 deliverances. It does not mean that he does not have the 8 deliverances. So this is the very serious mistake that is made. So this concerns liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom. Now, because of the view that Vipassana gives you wisdom, whereas Samatha does not give you wisdom, there is developed certain other wrong views. For example, that the jhanas is no use because there is no sati, no mindfulness when you attain the jhanas. And this one has got no basis. In the Majjhima Nikaya Suttas, it is stated that the Aryan Eightfold Path is to be cultivated one after another. The factors. First, you must have right view, and right view will lead you to have right thoughts, and right thoughts will lead you to have right speech, and right speech will lead you to have right actions, etc. And finally, right sati, right mindfulness, will lead you to have right samadhi. That means, if you practice sati mindfulness correctly, you must attain the jhanas, Now this is supported by a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, where the Buddha says, the unskillful monk, he contemplates body, feelings, mind, etc., but his mind is not concentrated. The hindrances are not abandoned. In other words, if a skillful monk contemplates body, practices sati, body, feelings, etc., his mind must become concentrated, and the hindrances must be abandoned. That means he must attain the jhanas, Now there is another sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, the other day I mentioned, was Majjhima Nikaya number 44, where the Buddha said the characteristic mark of samadhi is satipatthana. This is a very important statement. The characteristic mark of samadhi, of jhanas, is satipatthana. That means once you have the jhanas, satipatthana becomes automatic. But if you try to practice satipatthana, it's just like a person trying to practice concentration. It does not mean a person trying to practice concentration has got the 4 jhanas. That's not. You are only trying to concentrate your mind, You have still not been able to attain concentration. But when you attain the jhanas, then you have attained concentration. So in the same way, if a person is trying to practice satipatthana, it does not necessarily mean that he has got satipatthana. He's trying to be mindful. Satipatthana, by the way, means intense state of mindfulness. Because patthana comes from 2 words, pa and thana. Pa means setting forth, and it also implies going further. That is why normally pa also means extreme, intense. Thana literally means standing still. So it is also used to mean situation, condition, a state. So satipatthana means an intense state or extreme state of sati, not normal sati, not ordinary sati, an intense state of sati. And this satipatthana is obtained when a person attains the jhanas. Now, coming back to the point that this jhanas, when you attain the jhanas, there is no mindfulness. There is a description of the 4 jhanas. And in the case of the 4th jhana, it is stated how a person attains the 4th jhana, Normally it's stated in this way. And with the abandoning of bodily pleasure, and the previous, which is sukha, and the previous abandoning of bodily pain, which is dukkha, by the fading away of grief and joy, domanassa and somanassa, he enters upon and abides in the... So at the 4th jhana, the state of the 4th jhana is stated that a person has got complete purity of mindfulness and equanimity. Parisuddhi. Parisuddhi means complete purity. In other words, you cannot be more mindful than when you are in the 4th jhana. So how can you say that when you attain the jhanas, you have no mindfulness? It's completely different from what the Buddha says. And then there is a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya where the Buddha says that satipatthana should be abandoned after you have attained it. And yet, there are other suttas that say the Buddha's disciples, the learners and the Arahant, they always abide in Satipatthana. So in other words, when you cultivate to attain Satipatthana, you cultivate until you attain it. But after you attain it, the Buddha said, abandon the practice. Why abandon? Because, as I stated just now, the characteristic mark of Jhana is Satipatthana. That's why you can abandon the practice of Satipatthana, yet you still abide in Satipatthana because it is automatic. That is the only conclusion, logical conclusion that you can draw. And then there's another sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, in fact 3 suttas, where our Arahant Anuruddha was asked, why is it, can you please explain, what is the cause of your great psychic power? What did you cultivate to have such great psychic power? Because Anuruddha said he could see the whole world system so clearly, like in his hand. He can see the galaxy like in his hand, his mind is opened up so wide. So when he was asked the cause of his great psychic power, he said Satipatthana. And normally when you say psychic power, you always mean Jhana, yes or not? Only Jhana can give you psychic power. But here he says Satipatthana. That means Satipatthana is no different from Jhana. Only when you have Jhana, you have Satipatthana. And then there's other suttas, for example, in the Samyutta Nikaya, there's another one where the Buddha says, by making much of the 4 jhanas, by cultivating the 4 jhanas, one tends to Nibbana, one slopes to Nibbana. There's always, you have the jhanas means you naturally go towards Nibbana. And in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, the perfection of wisdom is the abandonment of the hindrances, which also means the jhanas. Another one of the wrong views, which is prevalent nowadays, is there is they tend to frighten you not to cultivate the jhanas. They say you can be attached to the jhanas. By cultivating the jhanas, you can be easily attached to it. This one is quite the opposite of what the Buddha says. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha said, there are 3 types of feelings. Pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, and neutral feelings. Okay? Now, pleasant feelings, generally, if you experience pleasant feelings, there is an underlying tendency to lust for it, In other words, you want to crave for that pleasant feeling, right? Any type of pleasant feeling, especially sensual, pleasant feelings. There is a tendency to lust for it, to crave for it. But the Buddha said, it's not in the case, or maybe here it's not the Buddha, it's an Arahant saying. He said, it's not in the case of all pleasant feelings that you have this underlying tendency to lust for it, to crave for it. He said, in the case of jhana, when a person enters the first jhana, the underlying tendency to lust, to crave for that pleasant feeling is abandoned. So you see, in the case of jhana is different, completely different. You can attain jhana, but the craving for it is not there. So to say that you can be attached to jhana, don't cultivate jhana, you can be attached to it as not only no basis, but to say that, first of all, I think we must think of abandoning eating, abandoning marital relations, abandoning sleeping, abandoning driving a nice car. All these things you must abandon first, because all these things will give you the tendency to lust for it. Whereas in the case of jhana is completely different. And in the case of the 4th jhana is even worse or even better, in the sense that just now I read to you the state of the 4th jhana. Before a person can enter the 4th jhana, First he has got to abandon sukha, he's got to abandon dukkha, he's got to abandon somanasa, got to abandon domanasa. That means all the pleasant mental body feelings, all the unpleasant body feelings, first he has to abandon. Then all the pleasant mental feelings, all the unpleasant mental feelings, he has got to abandon before he can abide in the fourth jhana, which is a state of complete purity of equanimity. So in the case of the fourth jhana, there is totally no basis to say, compared to other feelings, that you can be attached to it. Because you have to abandon these states, sukha, dukkha, domanasa and somanasa. But you can have a small attachment to this jhana. But that attachment cannot be like sensual pleasures. Sensual pleasures, you naturally get attached to it, Whereas in the case of jhanic bliss, your mind is so strong, your mind is so clear, that it's not likely when you compare it with sensual pleasures to be attached to it. Now in the case of saying not to cultivate jhana and all that, you find in the Anguttara Nikaya that the Buddha said the completely opposite thing, The Buddha said, if a monk can abide in jhana for just one moment, as short as a finger snap, just for a finger snap for such a short time, the Buddha said, that is really a monk. The Buddha said, that monk, he eats the country's food, not unproductively, He's really a monk and he listens to advice, the teacher's advice. Then the Buddha said, what more would I say of a monk who can abide in jhana longer? So you see, the Buddha is praising the jhana so much that anybody can even abide for an instant. The Buddha already really praised him. Now in the Digha Nikaya and the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha said, sensual pleasures should not be indulged in, should not be pursued. But jhanic bliss, or the bliss that comes from jhana should be pursued, developed and made much of. And then the Buddha said, why? Because it gives you the attainment of sotapanna. It gives you attainment of sakadagami, anagami, arahant. So you see, this again is opposite. And the other thing is that if you look into the suttas, you find that the arahants always abide in jhana, Whenever they don't have anything to do, they abide in jhana. This one you have to understand why, Because some worldly people, they will think, what is this monk always abiding in jhana? He doesn't want to face reality, he doesn't want to face the world's reality. He wants to run away and abide in jhana. Actually, if you really understand Dhamma, you observe carefully, you think carefully, you find it's the opposite, Because the Buddha said, our original mind is bright, is bright. And because of the extraneous defilements to the six sense organs, they pull our attention to the six sense objects. And because of that, our mind is defiled, by the six extraneous objects. So because of our attention being diverted to the six external objects, our bright nature of the mind is tarnished. We lose that brightness, So when we abide in jhana, our mind is one-pointed, our attention is not diverted out through the six sense doors. What happens? The mind becomes bright, Actually, the definition of jhana, nowadays, they use all kinds of definitions. The last time it was very bad. They used to define jhana as trance. So people had the wrong idea that jhana is like a state of trance. It's very different. And then later on, they use like state of meditative absorption. Not too bad, or mental absorption. It gives the idea what it means, but it's not the literal meaning, Jhana actually means a fire. It also means incandescence. That means very bright. So I would define jhana as a state of mental incandescence, Because when a person attains jhana, his mind becomes one-pointed. His mind begins to light up. His mind begins to become bright. So actually jhana is a state of mental incandescence. So when a person abides in jhana, he's actually going back to his original mind. So when we go back to our original mind, if you understand the state, you will come to realize that the world is actually like a dream. What we see, what we hear, what we smell, etc., these are all the creations of the mind. Because of past karma, it has been programmed into our mind. And because of the past karma, the mind creates an object for you to see, creates a sound for you to hear. That's why life is not much different now as when we are dreaming, right? When we are in a dream, it's real just like now, right? It's only after you wake up, then you realize, why was I so excited just now? Why was I so frightened? Why was I so upset? It is only a dream, right? So in the same way, now the world is so important to us, everything seems real. But actually, to the arahants, the world is not real, Real is just, the world is just a dream only. That's why they don't want to abide in the world, they rather abide in the jhana. We don't understand. We think this fellow is running away from the world. He's not actually running away. He's facing reality. We are in the unreal world. Now, the other thing I would like to say is that in my previous talk, I did mention that the hindrances are abandoned even when one comes out of jhana. And this I mentioned a few sutta. One was in the Samyutta Nikaya, where the Buddha said that the Seka, the learners, they have abandoned the hindrances. Whereas the Arahant has not only abandoned the hindrances, he has rooted out the hindrances. And then in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha told a group of new disciples, he said, as long as you have not attained to piti and sukha, you will still be continually, persistently troubled by the sensual desire and all that. It's only the hindrances. It's only when you have attained to piti and sukha that the hindrances go away, so that you are not always troubled by them. And a few other suttas indicate that to me that the hindrances are abandoned even out of jhana. And some people may think it's very strange. Actually, it's not very strange, because in the sutta, the Buddha said, when you listen to Dhamma, for example, the Buddha or his disciples speak Dhamma, if you listen, you pay your attention to Dhamma, at that time the hindrances are abandoned, and the 7 bojjhanga go to completion, From there you can understand why some people, when they listen to Dhamma for the first time or second time, they enter the stream, Usually when they listen to the Buddha speaking, after that the Buddha said, few hundred of these people all entered the stream already. You see? No meditation. Just listen. So you see, it's not very difficult to abandon the hindrances. And in the Digha Nikaya, the Buddha talked about his disciples who cultivate the spiritual path. And the Buddha said, even before that monk attains jhana, if he meditates and his mind starts to become concentrated, and when it becomes about one-pointed, before he actually attains jhana, the Buddha said the hindrances already abandoned. And then the Buddha gave 5 similes to say, this person is now very happy. He is like a person who was formerly indebted. He had a loan. It was always the loaners were always chasing him. Now he has paid off his debt, so he's very happy. Or a person who is sick, after he has abandoned the hindrances, he's no more sick. Or a person who is in jail, he is now released from jail. All these show that even a person, before he attains the jhanas, actually the hindrances already abandoned. You see? And to me, it doesn't mean that it's only abandoned short while. If it's only abandoned short while, why the Buddha said now his loan already paid off? Why he's no more sick? He's been released from jail? All those similes tend to show that it means for good. I mean, as long as that person continues to practice, as long as he can attain that state of concentration whenever he likes. Because our mind is made of habit. If we want to concentrate our mind, initially it's very difficult. But if you keep on at it, then once you can attain it, and then if you keep on practicing, it becomes a habit. And then the mind will incline that way.